call to order the meeting of the Newburyport School Committee for October 21st, 2019. Mrs. Kennedy, would you please call the roll?
Mr. DeCanta.
Here.
Mr. Cole.
Here.
Mr. Menon.
Here.
Mayor Donna Holiday.
Here.
Mr. Hofheiser.
Here.
Mr. David.
Here.
Mr. Callahan.
We have a quorum. Thank you, Mrs. Kennedy. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have an abbreviated meeting tonight because of the forum. So we are at our period of public comment, and I will probably be welcome to come up if you have something that you'd like to say to the school committee. We would ask you to hold your comments to about 2 minutes. I've been terribly taken advantage of the last couple of weeks, but if you could just give us, I have the gavel, I put the gavel today. But if you have comments that you'd like to share with us, you will also have opportunities to ask questions at the forum itself. But again, we have a short business week. Anybody have any comments for the school? Hearing and seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Do you have any warrants?
Yes, we do. Two warrants. First, I move that the following named bills of the Newburyport Public Schools amounting in the aggregate $21,087.70 be approved and forwarded to the city auditor for payment.
Second.
There are no conflicts.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? One absent?
Last warrant, I move that the following named bills of the Newburyport Public Schools amounting in the aggregate $483,819.05 be approved and forwarded to the city auditor for payment. There are no conflicts.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? One absent. We don't have minutes, so at this point I will turn to the superintendent for a student recognition.
Great. Well, first of all, we're going to be recognizing a senior at Newburyport High School, Anne-Marie No, will be recognized for her continued efforts in educating the community on teenage vaping, which is actually a perfect opportunity to lead in for tonight's forum. Anne-Marie was recognized this summer at the State House for receiving the Girl Scouts' highest honor, the Gold Award, for her project incorporating vaping curriculum into the district's health program, along with a lot of collaboration with Amy Heath, our wellness teacher at the high school, who will also kind of get a little bit more detail of what Anne-Marie has done and her accomplishments. So, you see.
Hello, my name is Amy Heath. I'm a wellness teacher at the high school. Anne-Marie Noe came up to me about 2 summers ago to ask me if I'd be interested in helping her work on her Girl Scout service project. She came to me with the idea of trying to focus in on vaping after talking to many of her peers at the high school, and really was passionate about trying to educate her peers on this topic. Together we sat down, she put together a pre and post test that I then basically gave to all my 10th grade students. She put together the data and the knowledge coming into the class. We collaborated on curriculum that we would be sharing, and then we gave a post test. And we saw really some great results from that I was hoping that she could share some of them tonight. But that was just one small piece of the puzzle. She reached out to me, got this started, but really, after I started talking to her, and this past year and a half, she's an amazing student. She's really self-motivated. She took it upon herself. She worked with the mayor. I know that she did some online campaigns with the mayor. She also is involved in the 84 movement. She's involved at the state level in pursuing and making sure that the word gets out about a lot of the negative effects around vaping. And it was just a pleasure of mine to be able to work with a student really on a continued basis because we're always sharing information. She's in contact with other individuals in the state and comes back with information. So it's really been a very positive experience for me, and I hope it has been for her, but truly an outstanding student, Anne-Marie Noe. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. It's Anne-Marie.
I don't see her.
She might be on her way, so we have that certificate, but I still think we give her a round of applause. Great seeing you. All right, Anne-Marie Nolan. All right, next on our agenda for the school committee, we have a few field trips. I think you're aware of some of them in the past, but at this point, we have our service and sports and Dominican Republic trip. High School International Cultural Club is organizing this trip during the 2020 vacation. So Eileen McConey, can you just tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. First, I also want to congratulate Anne-Marie. She is a phenomenal student. Actually, last year she came on to discover the arts and culture of England for, and it was phenomenal to see how much she got into every single one of the things that we did. So she is a phenomenal young lady. But I'm here to talk to you tonight about our trip in February, during February vacation. And we're going to be going to the Dominican Republic to do community service. So the name of the trip is Service and Sports in the Dominican Republic. And I work with the athletic director at the high school to look for and nominate students to attend this trip. We have 8 students that will be going. The focus is on doing service in a baseball community. If you know anything about the Dominican Republic, baseball is a very important part of their culture. But it also is not only a part of their culture that's very enlightening and wonderful and provides opportunities and community, but it also provides problems, such as young students leaving school and not getting fully educated. So we're going to be working with an organization that helps to educate the young children that go into these baseball camps to try to become professional baseball players. So we're really excited about it. So it's an 8-day trip coming up in just a couple months. And we are actually right now selling coffee and tea if anyone wants to buy some. I'll send you the link. You can buy online, okay? One of our many fundraisers that we've had to not only assist students with the affordability, but we wanted to raise money to bring to the community to help provide even more services for them. We're going to probably bring educational supplies and possibly a few baseballs along the way too. So if anyone has some questions for me?
Is the company you work with, is that EF Tours?
Yes.
And we haven't done this trip before, right?
Not this particular trip. Each year, the International Culture Club goes to a different destination.
Thank you very much.
So was the reason there was 8? Only 8 as well?
Well, it was open to students, but we especially looked to find, and wasn't that all these 8 were the ones that were suggested by the athletic director, but these are kids very involved in sports and they're community oriented. But the trip was open. Now, the trip is also the same year that there's the Galapagos trip, which has 80 kids going on it. And it's a community service trip. Community service trips typically bring in trips that are from 6 to 12 kids. That's the range you get for community service. You know, because it's sort of like, we might be digging ditches. Literally. That's one of the things we might do to help with the school.
Could you talk a little bit about, this is expensive, you know, 35 $100,000 back in the 40s.
Mhm.
So what's your target goal for fundraising?
What we did for fundraising is, number one, we wanted to fundraise enough money to provide $200 for each student. And we also worked out some discounts along the way, working with EF. And right now we're fundraising to try to raise another, what would be $100 per student to help bring to the community. We still have like 3 more fundraisers that are on track. The biggest one is at Shaw's. And that one usually brings in around $1,000 in that ballpark. That's one of our big ones, just a one-day, tag day effort. We never know the exact amount, but I've even brought in as much as $2,000 in that. So the Shaw's is very wonderful for allowing it.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions? So, will you be the only chaperone going?
Yes. But we will have our board director with us. They stay with us 24/7. And we'll also have the local nonprofit that we'll be working with and their adults. And everyone is, the board director is not only a certified teacher because EF is an accredited school, but is also someone who's certified in basic emergency health services and is also bilingual, is a local, but knows the area very well. Is accredited as a board director. So it means that they understand how to, they don't do the local, like we go to these different places, like we're going to go to the baseball museum. We'll have a local guide that'll take us to it. The tour director actually runs and manages for us everything that we need, and they stay with us.
You might have mentioned this, if you did, I apologize. What are the accommodations for the kids? Are they staying with families?
No, we're not going to stay with families. We're going to stay at a small hotel near the town that we're going to be doing the service with. So we'll go there, and in the evenings we're going to be meeting with former professional baseball players. These could be from the Caribbean League and also from the American League, or I guess National League. You know what I mean. And we'll also meet with members of different NGOs down there to talk about what it's like to be running some nonprofit organization. So each evening there is a period of time for community discussions with the baseball players, as I said, and the local aid people.
Any additional questions?
Eileen, can you give me a little bit more detail about what is the percentage of time that you're going to be spending on volunteer work? Volunteer work, and what percent on education? As part of the volunteer work, actually participating as tutors or teaching? You say they're going to be talking to the players that are coming to this program. Can you give me a little bit more about how that works?
Absolutely. Well, each day we will go to the village. We spend 7 days in the village where we're going to be working. And each day when we go, we'll either spend the morning or the afternoon doing the community service project that they'll direct us that they need for that particular day. So the majority of the work we'll probably do will be working with young children in an educational setting. But we also might be working on helping them with their baseball fields and things like that, because they are a baseball organization that's designed to help kids stay in school. Something that doesn't happen for a lot of kids that go to these facilities. But it might mean we might have some of the time where we might be doing some stuff to help with the structure of the school itself. We have a small school there. So they may need some painting of the school. They may need us to, like a mural or just painting the walls and stuff. So we'll be interacting with a lot of the children. We'll also be visiting the villagers themselves, so the families, and talking about their lives, learning about what it's like to live there, and to learn about the Dominican culture. So half the day will be spent on doing the community service, and then we'll have some time to interact with the community itself. And we might sit down to break bread with them, play some games with them, things like that. And then each day the students will also have an excursion We'll go to some natural habitats to learn a little bit about the environment of Dominican Republic. So it's not all exclusively sports focused. We'll have a chance to do that, to learn about some of the natural wonders. And we will go to visit some of the, as I mentioned, the baseball museum, where we'll get to meet with some of the former players. And in the evening, we're meeting with people from the village. We're meeting with, as I mentioned, people that have played in the sports or who have either successfully getting into an organization. But we'll also meet with young men who have gone through the training and that came out the other end without an education and without getting into the sport. What has that meant to them? And that's really the gist of what we're trying to do, is to help people not be in that situation. We want to learn about what that's like. What is it like for them living in the Dominican Republic? What are their opportunities, since they only have a third or fourth or fifth grade education?
The other question I had is, so you're going to be staying at a hotel, but the hotel is not in the village, is that correct?
Not right in the village, no.
Okay. How far is the hotel from the village, and how will the students get from the hotel?
Oh, okay. So first of all of our transportation is being provided for. So we'll have like a minibus that will, and we have a bus driver that will take us from one location to another, whether that's to the village or to one of the excursion sites that we will go to on the different days. The hotel, I don't know the exact distance, but it won't be any more than within 20 miles of the town. But yet the hotel hasn't yet been finalized for me, so I can't tell you the exact distance. But the village is kind of small, which is why we're going to stay.
Are you, where in what city are you staying in, or we plan to stay in, or what is the closest place that, what is your base of operations going to be?
Oh, okay. It's see if I can pronounce it right, because my names of Spanish names are hard to say. But it's Nock Middle is the name of the main town, and then we're going to go to a little village that's just outside of that for our services. And we'll be near San Domingo. We fly in and we'll fly out of that. We're not staying there. We're going to have one when we first arrive. We'll go visit the historical area, because it has the oldest European buildings in the West.
Any additional questions?
Motion to approve the service and sports in the Dominican Republic trip during February vacation 2020.
Second.
Any additional conversation? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, and one absent. You are unanimously approved the trip.
Thank you.
Good luck with it.
At this time, we also have a couple other field trips, but the same program. I'm going to ask Matt with Rochelle to come on up. This is our Model UN and the Civics and AP Government class in their competition.
Well, thank you. I have 2 trips to present. They're actually separate trips. One is for the World Fair Diplomacy class, and one is just separate for the civic program. So I'll do the Model UN first, which is the World Fair Diplomacy class. This year, we're excited to offer the Secondary Schools United Nations Symposium in Montreal, Canada, as our conference this year. This is put on by Yale University in Montreal. We've gone on this trip probably three or 4 times in the past, and it's seen as one of the most elite RUNs in the world. There are schools that are there represented from throughout North America, throughout Canada, the United States. Last time we were there were schools from South Africa, there were schools from parts of Southeast Asia. There was a lot of different schools there. The conference is run predominantly in English. There is a French component. There's like a French committee that's all in French. There's only one committee. All of our committees are all English speaking committees. And it's going to be November 14th to 17th. This is an overnight field trip. You have a charter bus to take us to Montreal. And we'll be staying at the Sheridan in Montreal, instead of Montreal. I'm going on a trip with William Croft, my co-teacher, as well as Tom Abrams and Constance Mack, who are both NHS staff and fellow chaplain. Group is of 19 highly motivated, excited students, two of whom I brought today to talk about their topics and what they're talking about. I'll turn it over to Dean Johnson and Andrew Cantor to speak to you a bit about the trip.
Yeah, so I'm Camden.
I'm Andy Cantor.
I feel like we should know you two very well by now. You get to come see us a lot, which is good.
Yeah, so this is a very, very exciting meeting at Model UN for us because us as seniors, we hadn't even gone to this. My brother, who is now a sophomore in college, told me a lot about this when I was in middle school. But to finally get to going was pretty awesome. So my topic this year is a custodial committee. So it's on the Russian Revolution, which is very interesting for me since I enjoy history a lot, and it's a very interesting topic to debate. It's really not discussed that much in any real American units in school. So it's something that I kind of get to dig a little deeper in that I usually wouldn't have the opportunity to. So.
And I'm really representing Chile for the Human Rights Council. One of the main topics is the rights of ethnic and racial minorities, which as a Dutch Mexican American, it's really cool to be exploring the different aspects of those groups. And additionally, the rights of children in conflict zones, which is also very important right now. The conflict in Turkey is still prevalent. So yeah, I'm really excited about this trip. I've been doing Model UN since 7th grade, but I got back into it last year. I think that Model UN has been the most important academic experience of my life. And Mr. Washington is an amazing teacher. And it's what inspired me to pursue my passion of politics and diplomacy. And I would not be who I am without it. So I'm really excited for this trip.
Yeah, thank you for giving us the opportunity to go on.
Thank you.
We have only one request, because they're very well done. We have only one request, is that you, like you did last year, you came back and talked to us about your experience, and we'd love to hear, after the first year, if you want to come back and give us a brief presentation for some of the students, we'd love that.
Will do.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about my grandmother's experience in the Russian Revolution.
Oh, really?
So,
Yeah.
it'd be fun.
I'm sure I'll be very well versed by the time I come back.
There you go.
Thank you.
Motion to approve the World Affairs and Diplomacy class trip to the Model UN in Montreal, Canada.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, none, one absent.
Me again. So the next trip that we have is to New England College. They're having a presidential primary convention. And this is an opportunity that I've been doing since 2002, Wendy Cross and I. This year we're going to, again, me, Wendy Cross, she's my travel companion, and Mr. Hill, Peter Hill, and Constance Connect. This trip is special because it happens every 4 years. As you know, New Hampshire is a hotbed of politics this time of year. And New England College puts on a forum where they'll invite all the candidates for president to come through and speak. And while not everyone comes, a lot of the main players come, a lot of the third-party candidates come, a lot of interest groups come, a lot of NGOs are there, experts in various policies are there. And the students are engrossed in a 3-day convention where it's just all politics all the time. In the past, students have seen John Kerry, they've seen John Edwards, they've seen Joe England, they've seen Rick Santorum. Last time around, we saw Bernie Sanders and Chris Christie. I've had students in debates, full-blown debates with Rick Santorum that was covered on MSNBC and the New York Times. It's an absolutely fantastic experience, and I would hope to be able to get recruited for this one. It'll be from January 7th to January 9th. We will be staying at the Hilton Garden Inn in Manchester, but the conference will be at the Doubletree Convention Center in Manchester. There will be a hotel shuttle each day going back and forth, and our transportation to the convention would be the Celtic bus. So that is that. Is there any concerns or questions about that trip?
I hope that get the opportunity to speak to the incumbent in office.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, it would be very interesting. Any questions? This is a trip that I've actually had the pleasure of being able to prove a number of times. It's wonderful. Do you have a motion?
Motion to approve the New Hampshire Primary Student Convention trip to New England College on January 7th to January 9th.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peck.
I would like just to revise the agenda here because our student recognition, he did a great job explaining everything, but we are very proud to give a certificate of accomplishment and recognition to Anne-Marie Noe.
The next item on our agenda actually could probably actually go through very quickly. Steve Cole usually represents us at the Mass Association of School Committee Conference, and he's not able to go this year. And I have heard from no one else. Oh, you did?
I thought Steve was going to.
Oh, no. Good. Great. Well, you'll be our representative, so if you want some quick guidance on these resolutions.
Yeah, I'm prepared to talk about it.
Good, all right, go ahead. You prepared to talk about it?
Well, I went through them.
Right.
Usually talk about them.
What we usually do is we just summarize what they are and then decide how we would like you to represent us. So if you want to just really, or I can, one of us can just summarize or switch on and off.
Sure, you can go ahead and start.
First resolution is banning.
Oh, right. Okay, yes, right. The first resolution is banning polystyrene from schools. My experience with these resolutions are that they have a lot of discussion about them, and we vote for them, and then you get the packet next year with new resolutions in it. They do lay out some lobbying and efforts. I didn't see anything in this one that would make me not want to do it. Sean, your thoughts on it?
Well, this first one?
This first one, yeah.
Yeah, I would be in favor of that, sure.
Anybody have any other opinion on that? Please vote on behalf of the school committee in favor. Educator diversity and professional licensure. When I read it, I understood that they were asking to come up with different standards to determine professional licensure for some of the licensed teachers.
No, they're actually looking to do away with the MTEL exam.
Yeah.
And the mass performance assessment for leaders.
With, you're not offering a substitute for it?
No, they're saying it says that school districts are capable of selecting qualified candidates for teaching positions, and there is no evidence that the MTEL is a reliable or valid measure of successful practice as an educator.
Can you address that to us, please?
Well,
I mean, in your experience, is this a problem?
for the MTEL testing, I think it's not indicative of the performance of a teacher, and so I think there are some teachers that go through a teaching program that have a difficulty with the MTELs, but it's not indicative of if they're going to be a proficient or, you know. So they're looking at that as a measurement stick on, I think, teacher performance. So.
I mean, I've taken it, you've taken it, sure.
I can tell you a couple things. I think it's an atrociously designed test.
Right.
Like the user interface is awful. I think the material it tests is oftentimes not relevant to a person's skill in the classroom or the curriculum they're going to be teaching. So I have some problems there. I've read some allegations that there are, implications for race and cultural bias. So there's a problem there. That being said, doing away with the MTEL would be a much bigger deal than I think they're trying to make it out here. I have necessarily no problems doing away with it. I think there are much better ways, like the district can bring people in, but it's going to have bigger implications than I think Mass is trying to associate with. It would be really revolutionary, I think, in the states. I'm pretty sure at least all 5 states that I've taught in have had exams that I've had to take to get there. But so I don't know how I feel about that.
We can empower Sean to hear the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I just know nationally, this is I think this topic is coming up a lot, particularly in large districts who are unable to attract diverse teachers, equal range of teachers. It's a big turn. So again, I mean, I've known friends, apart from that, who have had to take the test over and over again, and they would have been wonderful teachers, but then decided not to because they couldn't pass the ridiculous test. So I think it's a great idea. I think Dave's a little right because you're not really offering alternatives, which is kind of giving it up in the hands of districts. But I mean, I think it's a good start.
I think it would put the school committee association at deep odds with the teacher union, which I'm not necessarily against if it's for the right reasons. But I think they need to recognize, or they need to help people recognize what they're doing. Because the teachers union is deeply vested in claiming that there's a quality to the test they're passing. I can also tell you, teachers get no feedback when they take the test. You get a blind score, and you don't know what that score means, and you never get any feedback on it. So it's, all those things that are just atrocious assessment practices are the things that are used to assess our teachers by the state. So again, I'd have no problems getting rid of it. It doesn't feel like this is a great format to do it. So I'd be cautious.
Anybody else like to add to the conversation? Sean, you hear the conversation, you've heard us talk a little bit about it, so you would. School transportation, I guess what they're looking for, they certainly talk about what we're experiencing, which is we don't get a lot of bids for transportation anymore. And I think they're asking the state to do a study to promote greater competition, find out exactly what the problems are, and do what they can to promote greater competition. Is that a fair reading of it? Mm-hmm. I certainly think that's a good idea. Anything that promotes the competition of transportation, I think it's good. I would encourage you to support it, Sean. Climate change, we don't want to argue against transportation. Resolution 4 is
Yes.
Resolution 4 is asking the state to address climate change, school infrastructure need for emergency funding for disaster relief caused by catastrophes and weather events. So I guess they're asking for a more comprehensive approach to the impact of climate change in the state. I am a upon supporting that?
I agree with the climate change science. I like the climate change science. I'm not sure that the school committee board has got time to deal with climate change. I like the part where it's going to support building schools after natural catastrophes. And, you know, adding to any research or something like that. I don't know if we need to go after the policies, but
Any other feedback? Support that. Full funding of transportation costs of students in foster care and state care. That kind of seems like a good idea.
absolutely.
We support that, Sean. That's number 5. 6.
One second. Can you say that even better than supporting busing them would be helping them get housing within their local municipality, so foster care, kids in foster care aren't bounced from district to district? What's that?
That's a much bigger
I
issue.
say, but I've talked to DCF, they're like, well, we can get them a bus from 40 miles away, but I can't help them get a house next door, because we don't deal with it, so.
Yes. Yes. Sean, make the amendment to the motion. All right.
Go boy.
Universal quality pre-kindergarten access in Massachusetts.
Sean, can I ask you a question? Why is it that people always talk about quality free pre-K when not even kindergarten is guaranteed? I mean, we charge for kindergarten here, so we're going to give people free pre-K and then charge them for kindergarten?
Yeah.
I don't understand, and that seems to be like the kind of universal political language about let's do universal access to pre-K without considering kindergarten.
Yeah, I
What do you
think,
think for that?
well, I think a lot of districts are kind of wrapping their head around free kindergarten. In some districts, a lot of districts are moving towards that. But I think this, from the Massachusetts School Committee Association, is, I think, one way of beginning to address the pre-K piece, and then the kindergarten piece is something districts really going to plan out. They're going to do free all-day kindergarten. So I think that this is the first attempt to kind of make that act like a law that's passed.
Okay. I think we endorse that. Poverty in children. We resolve that we prioritize this matter of public policy agenda, file support legislation to support the eradication of poverty among children in Massachusetts. I think we would endorse that.
Yep.
Resolution 8, resolution for access to menstrual supplies. I think we don't speak with much authority on this one, but I think it's a good idea. And then we come to the charter school reform motion. Which should be number 1. And essentially what they're asking for is, I don't think that this has really changed in the years that they're asking for strict guidelines and regulations on charter schools, state requirements for all charter schools to be funded in full by the Commonwealth, reporting accurate data. Anybody would like to speak for or against that?
I think this is important. It's unfortunate that it hasn't been addressed with the new education funding bills, but they are putting more money into transportation and some degree charter school funding, but it really needs to be separated from Chapter 70, so we have to continue to advocate for it.
I think of all the things that are written there, that separating it out from Chapter 70 is something I would really support. So I'd encourage you to support it. Yes. We have a number of people here for the forum. Sorry. Is there anything else that you have? No, we've got the forum. So should we adjourn the meeting to the forum?
Yes.
We have a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye. All right.
I'll be ready. If you need anything, just call me. Or answer when it comes up. I just have to escape out of it. Press my well, I should be ready. Yeah. And I have all the
Yeah, you. All right, for our parents and guardians that come on in. First of all, I want to welcome everybody to the vaping forum. I'm Sean Gallagher, I'm the superintendent. If you haven't had the pleasure of knowing me or seeing me around, that's me. I think tonight I always think as a parent first, and there's challenges every year. And I think the vaping challenge for all of us has really just been forefront in the dangers and the CDC, the governor. So I think this is an extremely important topic for all of us as educators, parents, community members, school officials, state officials, that we really need to take on and to really collaborate on. And I think for us it's a multitask approach on our side. So it's working together from the school personnel to the city side, to the local agencies, to the state agencies. We're all going to work together to provide, I think, the best educational opportunities for our students and parents, but also to provide enough resources that if our students or our families are struggling with vaping, with addiction and other substances, that we all have the resources to really help our students. And I think that's what tonight is all about. We're going to learn about the adolescent trends and the dangers of vaping. We're also going to learn about the prevention and educational programming that we have here in the district. We're going to recognize, provide recognition of different symptoms and different items that may be used. And then, really important, our recovery and treatment options for students and families that may be struggling with these issues. I've been working with families for a long time, since 1990, is when I first got into coaching and education. And I think we've made a lot of gains in recognition and with the stigma on substances and addiction, which I think is really important. And in preparation for tonight, I kind of wanted to pool together some of the things, some thoughts and ideas about substances and vaping and nicotine. And as I went back in the early 1990s, we had a league conference with captains. When I was a coach, we were training the captains of the league. It was 100 student athletes. And we talked about, those three substances. We talked about alcohol, we talked about nicotine, and we talked about marijuana. And then in the mid-90s, I had an opportunity to do another presentation as a teacher and a wellness teacher for the community. In the mid-90s, I talked about the same things. I had a presentation on alcohol, on nicotine, and on marijuana as the gateway drugs. And then in the early 2000s, as an athletic director, the big piece that was coming out were these things called designer drugs, which is the ecstasy, GHB, that we had no idea about as a community, but these designer drugs were really the thing that was really impacting communities. And I'm sure our professionals that will be talking tonight remember these. But once again, it was still those most abused use of those drugs for teens. Again, alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana. And then 2015, we had as a principal, same type of thing. We had a forum because prescription drugs was really what was going around and being abused. But once again, when you look at the message, it's the same three.
alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana. Those are those gateway drugs that lead to other problems. So I look at this as a parent. You know, I'm very fortunate, knock on wood, it's never over being a parent. Every day, every weekend, it's the conversations with our children. Both my daughters are in college, and those same conversations I had when they were very young in elementary school. Same conversations in middle school, same conversations in high school. Ongoing, to the point where they would just blow me off. Dad, you don't know what I'm talking, you don't know anything. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm just principal and working with kids for 30-something years. You're right, I haven't seen anything. But those conversations I think are essential. And for me as a parent, academics was very, very important. And for me as a principal and administrator, academics are very, very important. There's no question about it. But there was 3 other areas that I was nervous about as a parent. Number 1 was substances. And number 2 was anxiety, depression, and adversity. And I guess those could flip. Because if some of our adolescents are struggling with dealing with adversity, being anxious, and falling into a rut, it could lead to substances. And we know the other flip side, if they start experimenting with substances, with nicotine and alcohol and marijuana, then it could add to anxiety and depression. And the other piece, having 2 daughters, was dating violence and healthy relationships, which I think all of us working with adolescents is a key. And then, as a parent, I worried about the academics. But I think it's ongoing. I think every year is a challenge. And so when vaping came out as a safe, quote-unquote, alternative to tobacco, I think the school systems and our communities did a great job on tobacco and nicotine and cigarettes, where you saw the drop in Andy Egmont's here for youth services. We'll talk to you about that. But vaping was what the kids thought was a safe alternative is actually a lot worse, and our professionals are going to talk to you tonight about that. So tonight we have a community forum. So there's a lot of professionals that are out here. We have school committee members that are here. Mayor Holliday is here. We have city council that is here. We have health professionals that are also here, because I just want you to all understand that we work together. So when we see issues that are impacting our society, or we see issues that are impacting our students and families, we're going to address it, but address it in a collaborative way. So I just want to thank all of the people that are here tonight. So when we get to the panel questions, there'll be other people that might be able to respond because it's in their area. I really believe forums are very important. So as part of the packet, as you came in tonight, we gave some information right in here in this handout about 10 steps to help parents. You also have the agenda with the forum. You also have some nice information on vaping and the hazards of vaping. And then also what's really important to us is I provided questions for each one of the speakers. So I thought this was important, because if you have a question that may be a personal question or a question for the district or educational question, what we're asking is if you could write these out for each different topic, and then you have 4 of these, and then we can collect the questions, and what we don't answer with the panel, we'll have everyone's question, we'll get the answers, and then as part of the email blast, I can send out the questions that were asked and the answers. So everybody has an opportunity to ask questions, at their convenience. So if you had a question, as I said, there might be some parents out here that are concerned. Maybe there is a student that is having some issues. You could ask that, and we have, your name is optional. You do not have to put your name on these. If you would like to put your name on those, that's fine too. But so for us, as the presenters are presenting, if you have questions during their presentation, write those down. We'll collect them throughout the night, and then we'll consolidate them, and then we'll bring them to our panel. All right? So, are we all set? All right. So we're very fortunate to have Dr. Cynthia Groton here, a research scientist and vaping expert. She's been presenting throughout the state for a lot of different districts, but also superintendents, principal associations, and really has the most up-to-date on the hazards of vaping and what it's really about for our parents and guardians that are here tonight. So Doc, take it away.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to talk with you tonight about vaping and disease risks. Some of you might see North Carolina and wonder why I'm all the way up here in Massachusetts, and that's because I work remotely for NC State. I live in Massachusetts, and I've been working on this database for about 13 years now, and it connects chemicals, genes, and diseases. And I come to you tonight primarily as a parent because my 3 children are late teens, early 20s. And about 2 years ago, I was at their high school Masconomet in Boxford, and they had a forum on behavior risks, similar to what you're talking about tonight. And one of the high school students got up and said that vaping was increasing at the high school, but it was just water vapor, so it was harmless. And working for this database, I knew that that wasn't the case, so I decided to do some research about the chemicals that were present in the vaping aerosol and whether or not they were safe as they were advertised or whether there were risks involved. So for those of you who don't know what vaping is all about, how it works, this is a picture of a vape mod. There's an on-off switch, and it operates a lithium battery, which powers up to heat the heating coils in the atomizer, which heats an e-liquid, and that turns the liquid into a vapor or an aerosol that's inhaled by the user. So there's a couple different things. Different vape mods have different battery outputs, different resistance on the heating coils, and those things determine the output of the vaping device. Now, vaping devices come in all different shapes, sizes, and colors now, heavily targeted towards youth. The top shows pre-filled nicotine pods in a Vuz Alto. The Swarin drop fits in the palm of your hand, many different colors, and this one has this black part at the top detaches, and it has a dual tank, so users can fill each side of that tip with different flavors of e-liquids so that they can mix flavors and have different recipes and customize their vaping experience. The Swarin Vegan has a sturdy clip that students attach to backpacks and pockets and things like that. And the AirPod system is about the size of a credit card, so it's super stealthy. You can break off the tip and fill it and vape discreetly. Juuls are by far the most popular in the United States right now. They come with pre-filled nicotine pods, and each pod has the equivalent of an entire pack of cigarettes worth of nicotine. All Juuls contain nicotine right now. The Juul is recharged on it looks like a USB flash drive, and it's recharged by computers. And the nicotine content is so high in Juuls, it's 3 times the permitted levels and has been banned in the European Union. The anatomy of a Juul, it looks very similar to the vape mod that I showed you in the earlier slide, where there's a battery component in the base of it that heats the coil, which heats the e-liquid, turns that e-liquid containing nicotine into an aerosol that's inhaled by the user. And there's several different flavors of the Juul, e-liquid. And it's very deceiving because if you look at the packaging of a Juul, there's only 5 ingredients on the side of the package. It looks, almost like Breyer's ice cream. They say only a few ingredients on it. But if you look at each of these ingredients individually, nicotine is shown in the yellow box. And you don't need to worry about what the compounds are, but there's 24 other compounds on that slide. And nicotine undergoes chemical reactions when it's heated and when it's in the body and metabolized, so that it changes into these different compounds. And each one of these compounds interacts with genes in the body and different pathways in a different, unique way. And when you look at the second ingredient, propylene glycol, once it's heated, which is shown by that triangle minus the H2O, it's converted into other chemicals. So propylene glycol can be converted into acetaldehyde and formaldehyde, which is known as a probable human carcinogen. And in biology classes, that's also what's been used to store dead tissue. Glycerin also undergoes thermal dehydration. It's converted into acrolein, which is a known health hazard and can cause cardiovascular diseases. Benzoic acid, shown in the yellow boxes, can be converted into benzene. That's also a known human carcinogen. So there's 3 different pathways shown here of how benzoic acid can convert into this carcinogen. And I show a 4th pathway because that pathway is how to make benzene from 2 of the other ingredients in the Juul, the glycerol and the propylene glycol. Then when you add in the flavorings, there's over 15,000 different flavors. And I just showed a few on this slide. The top part shows the catchy names that these e-liquids use, like Java Jolt and Kick, Pina Colada. But the chemicals that are used to create those flavors are shown underneath in the green. And they're things like diacetyl, which is known to cause popcorn lung, also known as bronchiolitis obliterans. So these are far from your safe ingredients. So how do scientists study these chemicals to determine what the health consequences are? They use machines like this. This is a picture of a universal system for analysis of vaping. It's kind of a long name, but what it does is this machine can measure the chemicals in the e-liquids and in the aerosols that are produced. And then they take volunteers who vape, and they can measure the chemical content in their urine, in their saliva, and in their blood before and after they vape to see the changes in chemical concentrations. Now this is a busy slide, but the main point of it is that title. Vaping is not just inhaling flavored water vapor. So if you look at the first 2 black boxes in the top left, it's a comparison between room air and air after somebody has vaped and blown out the vapor. So you'll notice there's a lot more particles after somebody exhales the vapor. And on the right, that cloud of vapor was centrifuged down, spun down into a black pellet and a white pellet. And those pellets were analyzed to show that there were heavy metals, including tin, nickel, chromium, and lead contained in those pellets. Another study with these colored rectangles showed that there were differences in the chemical concentrations of the heavy metals in the dispenser containing the e-liquid, in the aerosol, and the residual amount of heavy metals in the tank after the e-liquid had been heated. So the conclusion from these studies was that once the heating coils heat the e-liquid, the heavy metals in the coils leach off the coils into the e-liquid that get turned into the aerosol, and then users are inhaling those heavy metals. So the conclusion of the first part of my talk is that instead of just being water vapor, as some people who vape think, there's actually all sorts of chemicals that are present in those aerosols that are inhaled. So the next question is, how do we know what the health consequences are? So that's where my database that I work on comes in. We affectionately call the Comparative Toxicogenomics Database CTD for short. And it involves PhD level scientists reading studies, and we integrate that information with other databases that are publicly available that contain information on genes and pathways and diseases. And we make that information available on our website. And that's our website right there. We're publicly funded by NIH. Anyone can go onto that website. And though it's primarily geared towards researchers, it is publicly available. So that's ctdbase.org. It contains over 42 million toxicogenomic relationships, which are those connections between chemicals, genes, and diseases. And I want to make a distinction between when we read studies, and sometimes a chemical is shown to directly cause or be related to a disease. But we integrate that information in another way, where sometimes one study will show that a chemical affects a gene. It might mutate it, it might change the expression of the gene, and a totally separate study shows that a gene is related to a disease. So our database creates an indirect relationship, which we statistically rank, showing that there's an indirect or inferred relationship between that chemical and the disease. And I want to talk a little bit about nicotine, because that's one of the chemicals that's in our database that we've been looking at related to vaping. So nicotine exists in multiple forms. There's a protonated form of nicotine if there's a lower pH. There's a free-base form of nicotine. And then Juul has patented these nicotine salts. And if you look at the protonated form, this is present in tobacco or cigarette smoke. It deposits in the respiratory tract with about 50% efficiency. There's about 12 milligrams per cigarette of nicotine, and it's absorbed at about 1 milligram per cigarette. Now, when e-cigarettes were first invented, not that long ago, about 2014, 2015, they use a free-base form of nicotine. It's more volatile and more potent, but it has a harsher throat hit, and it rapidly deposits in the mouth and respiratory tract. And it had a higher nicotine content in these e-cigarettes. But Juul wanted to, I don't know what they wanted to do, but probably make a lot of money. But their formulation of nicotine allowed for a smoother throat hit, and that way they could boost that nicotine concentration up to about 60 milligrams per mil. So there's a very rapid absorption, and it can get a user hooked on nicotine quickly. And one of my colleagues talks about e-cigarettes, particularly Juul's, is not a smoking cessation device, but a nicotine addiction device. Because if you were really trying to quit smoking cigarettes, you don't need that high of a concentration, according to some professionals. Some people have used it effectively to quit smoking, but when they increase the nicotine content that high and package it the way they do towards youth, it's really deceiving. The other thing is flavors can change the pH of the e-liquid, and that can also change the absorption and the form of nicotine in an e-cigarette. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about nicotine in our database. We see that nicotine interacts with over 1,100 different genes. It's involved in over 2,600 individual gene interactions, 631 molecular pathways, 934 phenotypes. And phenotypes are more of an observation. So a phenotype might be something like a change in heart rate or change in blood pressure, but not necessarily causing a disease. Nicotine has been shown in our database to be directly related to 224 diseases and has indirect relationships to over 1,800 diseases. These numbers change continually. Our database is updated monthly, so every time our database is updated, these numbers change depending on the new studies that are incorporated into our database. Another section of our database has tools so that you can look directly at disease interactions of the chemical. And I just listed some of the direct disease associations between nicotine and diseases, including cardiovascular diseases, respiratory tract diseases, depression is a big one, heart attacks, and again, such a large number of indirect relationships with diseases that we haven't got the scientific studies yet to show the direct connections. There are tools in our database that allow you to put in a list of chemicals altogether and search for disease associations. So I put in just the chemicals in the Joule pod, in the e-liquid and the aerosol, right there, and came up with over 3,000 direct disease associations. And if you look at the indirect associations, then you're close to 100,000. And the top disease categories are nervous system, cancer, cardiovascular diseases, immune system, respiratory tract, and mental disorders. So one of my colleagues, Lester Hartman, is a pediatrician with Boston Children's Hospital and has a practice in Winchester. So when he talks to students in high school, he likes to show them the actual pictures that he's gotten from his practice. So this is a picture of vaping tongue, and if you see all the deep grooves, this hopefully does not look like your tongue when you look in the mirror. The e-liquids with the sweet flavorings deposit on teeth and gums and lead to increases in gum disease. So you're seeing it's not even just the aerosol, but it's depositing in your body immediately and infecting your organs. I'll go through these very quickly. Nicotine and the relationship with bladder cancer, with lung cancer, with popcorn lung. This shows an x-ray of an unhealthy lung with bronchiolitis obliterans, brain stroke, congestive heart failure, and heart attacks. So e-cigarettes can double your risk of a heart attack. So students like to know, well, everyone likes to know, what are some of the more immediate effects? Because it took us decades to find out that cigarette smoke was related to lung cancer. So some of the more immediate effects are that nicotine is highly addictive and increases the likelihood of smoking cigarettes. It also, there's been studies shown that it increases the likelihood to switch to other drugs, to vape THC and other illicit drugs. It has direct effects on cardiovascular fitness. There was a study, in the news just in September. A Newburyport parent published an article about her son who was a hockey player, and after juuling for several years, couldn't even complete a shift on the ice because it was out of breath, and that they attributed to juuling affecting his respiratory system. There's direct effects on mental health, where adolescents have been shown to have increased depression, panic disorder, and inability to experience pleasure. Activities that they once found very pleasurable with their friends, they're no longer interested in. Studies in universities have shown an increase in illicit drug use, mental health problems, and impulsivity. There was a California study in university students showing that it also significantly affected students' sexual health. There are also, even if you're not vaping, but you're with people who are vaping, which is called secondhand vape, it's just that aerosol in the air, that's also toxic. And third-hand vape is when those particles settle on a surface. Those also contain the heavy metals, nicotine, and things like that. So can e-cigarettes be used to vape other substances? Absolutely. The open systems where you fill your own e-liquid allow users to add any other substance that they want, including marijuana and other illicit drugs. And the closed systems like Juul pods can be opened up and modified to use the same other substances like THC. There are several scientific studies on vaping cannabis, but definitely not enough. Cannabis smoke has been shown to contain many carcinogens, equivalent to extreme air pollution, such as wildfires and severe industrial pollution, and it can cause cardiovascular and respiratory disease. And I have a video clip here. I don't know if it will play. If it doesn't play, I'll just skip it. But this was on the news on Good Morning America in September. And I wanted to show, if the sound doesn't work or it doesn't show, but it was very dramatic that an 18-year-old's lungs before and after vaping, there was cloudy, opaque lungs, and also to see, a young boy kind of convulsing on a table after vaping-related illness. Oh, so the volume is not coming up here. I'm going to stop the slide here. So this is some of the bulleted points about the mysterious lung illness that's been in the news a lot lately, and some of the symptoms, because I think that's very important for parents to be able to look at some of these symptoms, such as nausea, vomiting, chest pain, difficulty breathing, unstable vital signs, and low oxygenation of blood. And I'm gonna show. And these are the x-rays just showing the before and after vaping. Okay, so the Center for Disease Control, on their website, which was just updated in October, gave statistics of over 1,400 vaping-related illnesses across 49 states, and 33 confirmed deaths related to vaping in 24 states. A large majority of these patients reported vaping THC, but not all of them did. 85 reported vaping only nicotine. The CDC site goes on to say that nicotine is highly addictive. It's especially harmful for adolescents whose brains are still developing. And they go on to say that the use of e-cigarettes or vaping products is unsafe for all ages. So I have a couple summary slides to show vaping affects users differently. It does depend on the type of device and the e-liquid used. The vaping patterns, which include how frequently somebody vapes. There's even a difference between vaping early in the morning versus vaping later in the afternoon. That pediatrician, Dr. Hartman, said some of his patients even get addicted to the point where they sleep with a Juul under their pillow because they can't get through a whole night get a good night's sleep. Or students taking the SATs and they can't get through a 45-minute segment because they need another hit of nicotine. It depends on the coil resistance, the age and composition of the coils, the user's age, weight, metabolism, health and genetics, and other environmental factors. Many people ask, well, isn't it still safer than cigarettes? So I thought I'd just put a slide in to show a little bit about the comparison between cigarettes and e-cigarettes. Both are addictive, both expose users to toxic chemicals, both the smokes and the e-vapor or the aerosol. Vaping can increase the risk of smoking tobacco cigarettes as well as THC and other illicit drugs. Exposure to toxic substances from combustible tobacco cigarettes may be greater than from e-cigarettes. It doesn't have necessarily all the tar. However, exposure to metals such as lead, nickel, and chromium may be greater in the e-cigarette vapor. And both smoking of any kind, both of those increase the risk of adverse health outcomes. So some of the take-home points would be that both e-liquids and aerosols contain toxic chemicals. Vaping chemicals can cause DNA damage and impact genes, pathways, and the immune system. Vaping negatively impacts both physical and mental health, and it increases the risk of thousands of diseases, and many of those we're just beginning to see the effects of. So resources for help, I think that's what's coming next in the evening, but one of the main points is to educate yourself and talk with your children. There's 3 websites here, getoutrage.org, the e-cigarettes website from the Surgeon General, and the Centers for Disease Control. And I will leave this with this is the web page for that first one of getoutrage.org, and it talks about the new look of nicotine addiction and some of the e-cigarettes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rodden. We appreciate your information. And as we saw this presentation as educators, it's so informative, and it's scary stuff that's out there, especially the misinformation among the population and our students thinking it's just vape, it's just flavored water. So I'm hoping that that helps. We'll be posting these presentations on our website. I also see parents have been taking pictures of the slides, which is great. Thank you for that. At this point, Ms. Riccio is going to talk about some of the education programs that we have in place and some of the support that we're giving parents and families. And just as you know, with vaping, as an administrator, we're beyond just punishing. So this is not a student that's utilizing vapes in school as a rebel, as so to speak. These are students that are utilizing during the school day because for 5 hours they can't stop. And just if you're looking at that joule, 1 joule is a full pack of cigarettes of nicotine, and as the doctor showed, the impact on these addictive behaviors. So not only do we have educational programs going on, but we've kind of switched our discipline in the sense of providing opportunities for rehabilitation, counseling, and therapy for our students once they get involved in this. So, and Ms. Riccio will kind of walk you through that, and at the end of that, at the end of the night, we also will have opportunities for questions. So at this time, as Ms. Riccio presents her presentation, we'll walk through the audience, and if you wrote down questions for the previous speaker, we'll collect those. And then after Ms. Riccio's presentation, we'll collect those questions. And then at the end, our last speaker will collect those questions. So, Ms. Riccio,
all right.
take it away.
All right, we're ready. Does anybody need to stretch your arms or something? Stay awake during those. So, we heard Dr. Grondin speak last March, and her presentation really went to my heart, and it went to a number of the staff that were present at that presentation. Because what it really said was, these kids are getting hooked. They didn't know the degree of severity. I've had some pediatricians tell me they believe some students can get hooked by smoking a joule once. So with them purposely manipulating that nicotine salt to make it 4 times more intense than a general cigarette, I said, you know what, man, we are going to do everything we can in Newburyport to help our students and families. So I'm going to quickly kind of go through what we do. There's a number of staff people here that also work on this, and school administrators. So here we go. So this is the latest study we have around our area. This is Massachusetts statistics, but I think this is doubled or tripled in 2019 for students. This is a study, this is the study that Dr. Grondin was talking about. This is the FDA sending out their consumer warning for vaping THC. It's been shown to be linked to 77% of those 33 deaths. So she also very eloquently talked about how does nicotine work. And you know, to be honest, we probably started seeing this over 2 years ago, and we weren't really sure what was going on with our students. We hadn't put the two together. And now I think back, oh, I wish I'd only known, but you see these kids, their behavior has changed. They're not making the same sound judgments they were making before. They cannot sit still. Sometimes they can't make it through a class, and their behavior has completely changed. And talking with families, they'll just tell me they have a different kid on their hands now, and I can believe it, because nicotine hijacks that brain. It goes and creates a dopamine, makes it feel great the first hit. What doesn't, right? When that's what the drugs do. And then it takes over, and they need more and more, and then that's when the cycle starts. And you know, a jewel pod, and she was talking about it, it's like the size of a dime. And to think that's 20 cigarettes. They can smoke that in 20 minutes. I don't know, it's sad. So we decided, okay, we've got these kids, what are we gonna do? You can't immediately send them home. They're gonna just, I would, if it's me and I was addicted to nicotine, I'd have to just sit at home and take care of my baby. So we found out about the Center of Tobacco Research at UMass, has an online 12-module course for healthcare providers, teachers, counselors, doctors. And so a number of us start taking this course. So we start to learn about how do you help people with cessation. I had been taught the DPH and nursing courses, but I really felt like, you know what? They didn't go deep enough. I didn't know enough. So we started taking this class. And I'm telling you, do you know that if you laid all the tissue of your lungs side by side, that our lungs would cover a football field? Did you know that it takes at least 6 times for the average person who's addicted to finally make it that last time and quit? So when you start to learn these different things about what it must be like to be embroiled with an addiction, you realize you've got to put stuff in place for people to succeed. And the other great thing about working in the Newburyport Public Schools is we try to build things so that our students end up in 21st century graduates, meaning we want our students to stand up and say, I want to have health. I want to determine what is going in my body. I want to make the best decisions. I want to help my friend. Those are the type of skills we want to encourage students to have. So you're going to start to see what we've done. Again, just reiterating, it's a disease, it's not a choice. So if you have that mindset, then you can set the foundation for people to get well. So we have these kind of core values, you've probably heard about them, and the core values are that you are going to treat others as you want to be treated, so that you're going to meet students where they are, and it's not like you're going to let them get away with a million things. You're going to give them a choice. And the steps and processes we put in place provide for them to choose for counseling, for them to choose for avenues to make their life more healthy and make choices and learn tips and techniques to control their cravings, etc., etc. And then we have determined education from, we're going to start 3rd grade, making it fun. They're going to love their bodies. It's not going to be scary, but we're going to give them the information. We have to listen to the student voices. A lot of what we did was coming from the high school students looking at us saying, you know, you need to have high school students go down and teach the middle school students. So that's happening this year. And then when we were talking to 7th grade students, they said, you've got to get down to the 3rd grade. You got to get to the Bresnahan School, Mrs. Riccio. So I said, all right, man, we're listening to the students. So this is what we created. This is a 6-pronged approach to combating vaping in Newburyport. And it involves the student education going from 3rd grade through 12th. And it's what you do is you kind of have different disciplines, the health educators, the teachers, different science teachers, and you create something called a circular curriculum so that each topic gets talked about as we swirl around, you get older and older, so that we keep reinforcing the healthy behaviors. With then parent education. Well, hello, you're at one of my parent forums that I was going to run, where we're trying to provide parent education so that you have different ways of getting this information and seeking help. Then we have developed protocols for managing vaping in the schools. I have to look myself here. The other really incredible thing about working in Newburyport is the ability to work with the physicians in this area. And I've met with a couple different groups because we also realized that you've got to really help support the cravings. If a student really wants to quit, that's number one, they've got to want it. Then we've got to help them with the cravings, and that's local physicians working and helping to monitor nicotine replacement therapy. And I don't know where Dr. Slocum is tonight, but he really helped me. Hello, sir, thank you. He really helped me get started with sharing different guidelines among practices. And that's what has been so great, to meet with the physicians in our area, and we're sharing. You're doing this, and you might refer here. We're going to try this type of modality for a nicotine replacement therapy, and we're connecting together. It's really nice. And then we're gonna see how we do, and we're going to evaluate it. And I'll let you know next year. So part of what we're doing, and you can ask more questions of the high school folks that are here. But we have 2 different avenues for the administrators and counselors and nurses to work with the students and the families, and this is where the choice comes in, listening to the student and meeting them where they are. So this is called PASS, Positive Alternative to Student Suspension. This is the brainchild of Michelle Lipinski, the principal of the Recovery High School in Beverly, and the Beverly YMCA. And this is in its 3rd year, and we are fortunate because we slipped in. We're kind of one of the last high schools in the consortium to make it in, but I'm thrilled we're in because what they have done is they have counselors there. This is the building. You can see that green wall, and when you walk into this building down in Beverly, there's this big window, and all of a sudden, you look at this window, the window looks over the water. So you are totally in a different place where you were. You're not back at your high school, you're not back with your peers. Your parents have given consent for you to come here, so you're gonna have a little bit of a mind shift. They do counseling, they do screenings. You also complete homework, you've gotta get academics done. So you're not being suspended, you're actually coming here and you're on the way to health. You can go from 1 to 5 days. So that's a really awesome program. And then we also have, so for people who don't want to go to the diversion program, or they don't want to go down to Beverly, or the principals might think that it's not quite so severe, there are these incredible staff members that are in the public schools that said, you know what, I'll meet with these students because the number one thing that will help these students toward health is building a trusting relationship. So you have staff members that said, I'll work with them. So this is the design we started this year, and it has a wellness teacher who then utilizes some of the tips we learned from the online cessation program. So you kind of meet them where they are, see how they're ready to go, and then talk to them about some tips in quitting or how life is going in school. And then they're going to spend some time with a school nurse, they're going to spend some time with a biology teacher, and then they spend the 4th week back with the school principal and the adjustment counselor, which kind of oversees the whole program. And so it's a really great option. Oh, I forgot to say, and that's actually the nurse, that's the nurse Susan Anderson. She'll be here to answer some of your questions too. So the nicotine replacement therapy, I come back to this because, again, the FDA, I really feel like it needs to step up and provide some more clear guidelines for folks under 18. But in spite of that, we have incredible physicians in this area that say, you know what, we're going to follow the regular guidelines and help students to control their cravings, or they're never going to be able to keep taking the steps toward recovery. Combining counseling and nicotine replacement therapy doubles your chance for success. And that's why it's so important that you work with your family physician and include it with behavioral counseling, and then keep supporting your student. We also do something called SBIRT screens. I don't know if anyone has had any of their students 7th or 9th grade. The governor approved school nurses and counselors to provide, this is called short brief intervention referral to treatment. It's really just a conversation, a guided conversation with students around choices they might be making, how to stay safe. And this is what the screening tool looks like. It was created by Boston Children's Hospital and John McKnight of Mass General Hospital. But that prior study says that if you utilize that tool, it has shown to be effective for students down the road. But again, what you're doing is building that trust and relationship, sitting and talking. And while I was doing my SBIRT screens is when I probably screened 35 to 40 7th graders, and I would say at least 12 told me that I needed to be getting down to that Bresnahan school. They're very quick to tell you what you should be doing, I have to say. So we also have, there's different ways for students to quit. We'll meet them where they are again. We offer the online programs, the Teen Quit Lines. What's very interesting in Massachusetts now is that the Truth Initiative is one of the big online quit programs for teens, and Massachusetts is now partnered with them, so any teen that quits in the state of Massachusetts through the Truth Initiative will be able to monitor that and see how successful they are. But, you know, we've actually kind of learned a lot, so we can offer a lot of help along the way. This is an important part. We built a web page just for parents so that you could get information. So I'm going to try to get the link to work here. So does this look familiar, I hope? Your favorite school district? People are supposed to laugh now. Okay, so this is on our homepage, and we added this little, I'm trying to talk and do this at the same time. I have new glasses on, this is not good. Where's my mouse? Oh, where did it go? That's even more helpful. I don't know what happened here. It's dead now. Okay, there we go. I'm sorry. Thanks for hanging with me here. Okay. So this is on your web. This is on the parents page. Do you see where it says district parent info? Then you go down to parents, and there you have this area of vaping, substance abuse, what you should know. So we built this page for you. The red gives you the highlights. Here's the general resources. This is the Truth Initiative. I added the FDA consumer warning. Then these videos are the good videos. This is the new look of nicotine addiction that Dr. Grondin was talking about. And I added my favorite websites. I know I have a lot in here, and I probably didn't put, I only put half in. So I really did try to pick the best ones for you. The Parents Against Vaping, the emerging tobacco products is good. Just for kicks and giggles, I decided to put the respiratory illnesses, all the different warnings from the FDA. I don't know if anybody follows me on Twitter, I keep kind of talking to them because I'm not really happy with them now, but I keep trying. The most fun thing I think that we just added to this was this one here, a tip for talking to your teens. If you're really frustrated, I really like this little tool. It's from the CDC, and it has like, if your teen says this, you know, try that. Because was it not exasperating when they're teenagers and you're trying to talk to them and now they're kind of, their behaviors change, you're not sure what to say? It's a really nice little tool. There's actually this resources for teachers. This FDA sponsored Scholastic partnership curriculum is really good. But anyways, okay. So going on down, here is where the different tips are for teens to quit and avenues to try. But the main thing is see your school nurse or your counselor, because we will help you and your family. And last but not least, I don't know if any of you came to hear Dr. Ruth Pody speak back in March of 2016, but this is a Searchlight movie that she talks about brain development, and it is absolutely fantastic, so we kept it there for you. And that's that, and I did keep going. Okay, close all. There we are. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kathy. And if you have questions for the parents, we'll be around. We'll be collecting those on behalf of the school for our forum at the end. And last but not least, we're very privileged to have Gary Gassman, Dr. Gassman, and Christine Turner. Dr. Gassman is the Executive Director of the Link House, and Ms. Turner is the Director of the Ambulatory Services. And we'll be presenting for services outside of the school, and we also work with them in the school for students and families. Here you go. All right. We'll be collecting additional questions, and the goal is to answer as many questions as we can, pointed questions, and everything we collect. If we don't get to your question tonight, we'll answer and then send that out as part of our messaging, so everyone will be heard tonight. All right, we're good though. We're good.
Great. So good evening. I recognize that you guys have been up for at least 14 to 16 hours, and I'm acutely aware that there's a Patriots game tonight. So we're going to try to make our comments relatively brief so that we have time to do a Q&A. And so when you put together a presentation like this, you don't know how many people are going to show up, what their agenda is for showing up, and what they really want to hear. So we're going to talk a little bit about who we are, what services we bring to the community, talk a little bit about what we did the last few days to put this presentation together, and then hopefully open up to questions and answers, because I think that's really why you're here, is to get some real-time information in addition to what you've heard already tonight. So standing to my right is Chris Turner. She's the newly appointed Director for Ambulatory Services and is running this new site called the Center for Behavioral Health and Addiction Services, which is part of Link House Incorporated, which has been in our community now for 48 years, which you may or may not know. We provide services, substance use services in a residential setting, but we've realized that we need as a community to offer outpatient services to address some of the other issues that are happening in our community. So we thank the school committee, Mayor Holliday, Superintendent Gallagher, and Kathy for inviting us today. So we've actually never presented before, so we may arm wrestle from here and there for the microphone, so we'll see how it goes. We haven't rehearsed this either, so. All right, so it's a terrible acronym, CBAHAT. Couldn't figure out a better one. We wanted the word center in there. We wanted the word addiction and treatment services. So we are located in Amesbury at the Boston North Tech Park. Who knows where that is, just out of curiosity? about half the room, great. So it's a brand new building, modern facility, and a great place to have a treatment facility. And there's our website address. What's that? Just look at this, there you go. Okay, so what we provide is a combination of traditional outpatient and group counseling services dedicated to addiction focus, as well as traditional mental health, assessment and referrals. And we're going to get into some of these in a little bit more detail in a second. I'm just kind of throwing them at you real quick. We're going to provide recovery coach services, as relatively new service in our community, as well as prevention and advocacy to partner, like we're doing tonight, to partner with communities, to partner with schools and health centers, and the various local governments. So we're licensed by the Department of Public Health, in addition to the Bureau of Substance Addiction Services. So we have 2 licenses, both in mental health clinic as well as a licensed substance use treatment center, which means that we have expertise in both arenas and can help families in various natures. And so our staff are a combination of consulting psychiatrists, psychiatric nurse practitioner, who I'm going to give a shout out to Margie. Margie, raise your hand. Margie Wallentek is our nurse practitioner at the center, as well as master's level clinicians. And so why did we open the center in our community? And Chris is going to answer that. Why not?
Okay, why not? Well, I've been in residential treatment for a very long time, inpatient treatment, and I know that Link House has been around this area for a very long time. I also know that whenever we try to refer anybody to outpatient services, to counseling, there's a very long wait list. I see people going into crisis and going into the hospital and being told, you have an appointment in 5 weeks. They're just being let go because of a crisis, and they have to sit on this for 5 weeks or more. I worked in residential treatment where our patients could only get to see a therapist on a 3-month wait list. So there are some services in this area, but there's not enough. I mean, we know that we have a mental health crisis, you know, whether we're talking about vaping, smoking, illicit drugs, depression, anxiety. We have a mental health crisis, and we don't have enough people out there to address it. So that's why we're here, and that's why we did this.
So we're not experts in vaping, but we are experts in the concept of addiction, and we have the resource and facilities to help a variety of families and individuals, as well as provide community resources. So as you can see from the screen here, these 5 or 6 bulleted points are the areas in which this new center is going to focus on. Most importantly, we're going to try to help manage addiction to opiates, cocaine, and other illicit drugs, as well as now vaping and marijuana specifically. We are going to provide individual, group, and family therapy and couple counseling, and we hope to do at some point structured IOP, which is getting groups of people together for a few hours at a time to focus on specific issues that have common themes. We're going to provide assessment to individuals' needs and coming up with an action plan. And actually, Chris, I think you wanted to talk about this one in particular.
Okay, so the thing is, I would like the center to become a place where you can call just if you have a question. Not only, you know, I need to make an appointment with a therapist, but if you have somebody with a substance abuse problem in your family or one of your friends or whatever, and you don't know where to turn, and a lot of people don't know where to go. They just don't know where to go. And there's a lot of resources out there, and we know about those resources. So I want us to become known as the place where you can pick up the phone, because we're there to help you. If you're in a position where you say, I don't know what to do, and I've been in that position many times with my kids and various family members, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to call. Call us, and if we don't have the answer, we'll find it for you.
Right, and I think to Chris's point also is what we're there to do is provide that resource. If we don't have that service in hand, we'll help make referrals to help the community. Because we get those calls all the time, and it's tricky navigating, especially for a family that's that's new to the issues of addiction. It's hard to navigate those, know where to get accurate information, who to call, where to go. And so that's what we're there to do to help as well. One of the other components that we're going to offer is traditional psychopharm medication, so helping individuals manage depression, anxiety, as well as something called medicated-assisted treatment, which are medications that are specific to helping people that have had opioid addictions stave cravings and try to stay neutral to warding off the desires to use opiates. As well as, one of the last bullets on there is, I think really what I'm proud of is that we wanted to, this is something I've been wanting to do for years, is to try to get Link House to help become a community partner with the schools, with the community, with the hospital, and be your voice for addiction in the community. And so by opening the center, we're hoping to be able to provide this community resource, to provide professional education trainings, and to provide education in general to the community. And there'll be a lot more coming in that in the next few months. So let's see. So we just were asked to put this on a few days ago, and we thought, we're both parents, we've been navigating, so Chris's kids are now adults in their 30s and probably with kids as well, right? Yep. And I have 2 teenage daughters. I have a senior in the high school, and I also have a daughter who's now a sophomore in college who was, I think, a 2018 NHS graduate. So we've been dealing with the pitfalls and landmines of all the issues that were brought to bear earlier in the evening around how to keep them safe, how to talk to them in a healthy way about drugs, particularly vaping in this case. And so we thought it'd be interesting if we got a small group of students together and we wrote about 20 questions and fired them off in a small format. We met with them last Friday to get their perception, because it's one thing to get the research, it's another one to get what studies are done by the CDC, but I think it's also maybe even more important to hear from the students themselves. What do they see? What are they looking at? What are their issues? What are their concerns? And maybe what's the disconnect between what we think they need and what they're saying that they need. And so what we're going to show you is some of the information from this small group, and it may not be representative of the population of this at the high school, but it's a starting point. We're hoping to go back and get a larger group and have further conversation with them, because it was very illuminating for us, but actually rewarding for them as well. They felt great about having the ability and opportunity to talk. Would you say?
Yeah. And we'd like to do more of those, I guess you call them focus groups, with the kids to find out what they think. You know, we told them, we're getting together to talk about you. What would you like that group of people to hear at the end of the evening? What would you like their takeaway to be? And it was really interesting. So I'll tell you what they said. These are not necessarily my opinions. So they're the opinions of the teens that we talk to.
And maybe not the opinions of the school body at large, but for this group, which may be representative sample, who knows? But here we go.
I was actually very impressed at how much of their own research they were doing. They have access to the internet now, of course, and they can Google just about anything and everything. And they were very, very knowledgeable about everything that we've talked about tonight. They spoke to that in a very intelligent and informed way, I thought, about the ingredients, the biology, the mode of delivery. They described all the physiological effects that them and their friends have experienced, the things that you've heard about tonight. And one of the things that really came across is that they really do care about their health. They care. They think that maybe sometimes we don't think they care, but they care about their health and they care about their bodies. And they often felt that they had the right information, and the adults that were telling them about vaping, whether that was parents or whether that was at school, had actually the wrong information. So that puts the adults in a very difficult position, you know, not having much validity about what they're saying when the kids feel that your information is wrong. So if I can express anything tonight, it's get educated yourselves and make sure that your information's correct before you deliver that to your kids, who oftentimes know more than we do.
Yeah, no, I just want to say, so, not a criticism, but maybe a disconnect from their perspective, that there might be another opportunity to engage the students in a different way.
They told us that as freshmen, many of them had tried vaping. They said a lot of the kids coming up from, what do you call it here, middle school? Yeah, if you can't tell. a lot of the kids coming up from middle school have tried vaping because they have friends in high school that have helped them try. But they felt that it peaked and became problematic in sophomore year, and that's when they said that they expressed that they felt most vulnerable. They felt that in sophomore year the stress was much higher, and that they were more likely to experiment with vaping and get more deeply into it. They told us that they thought 100% of high school teens have tried vaping, that every one of their friends have tried it, and that 80% of the people that they're in school with right now are vaping. So, very high, I thought, but they were pretty adamant about that. And we asked them, you know, how did they get into it, and, you know, was it peer pressure? And they looked at us as if we were dinosaurs, and told us that peer pressure doesn't really exist the way it used to exist when we were in school. So, not quite sure what that means. And that the benefits are social. You know, they get together to vape. It's an appetite suppressant, especially for girls, and it actually is a stress reducer. They did not perceive it as a gateway drug. They certainly know the lingo that we use as it being a gateway drug, but they didn't believe that it was. They think that the people who smoke THC, marijuana, cannabis, whatever you want to call it, were going to do that anyway, and it wasn't because they started vaping. They felt that those kids had already made that decision to smoke marijuana, and vaping had really nothing to do with it. They do not believe that vaping with nicotine leads to vaping with THC. Like I said, that's their opinion in that particular group.
Sure, yeah, so we highlighted this one in red because of all the things they talked about, this, in our estimation, was the take-home point for us that we wanted to convey to you guys. Just out of show, parents in the room that have a middle school or high school student, just by a show of hands. Yeah, so the majority. They feel as though we're not talking the same language in terms of how to address the conversation around vaping at home. In fact, the group they were with, 100% of them had not told their parents about the fact that they were vaping. And that's kind of scary. And they weren't comfortable talking to their parents because they felt as though if they talk to their parents, there'll be consequences at home. Meaning, you can't hang out with certain kids anymore, you're going to be restricted in certain activities. They also felt if they talked to their parents, they would feel judged. And they might even be punished. And punished has different connotations for different families. They might even feel shamed. And so what they wanted to convey is that that they would be considerably more apt to want to talk to their parents about this and even ask them as for help if there's a way to have a different conversation with them in a more open format, not judgmental. Some of the things that got addressed earlier by Kathy in her presentation. But that, you know, from their perspective is critical. And while we think as parents we're doing that, from some of their perspectives, we're not. And so I think that fathers more conversation about how to have that conversation at home. This is scary. When we asked the question, how long do you think it takes to get addicted once you've started using vape, consuming vape? Some of them said less than a week, but certainly less than 2 weeks. That was shocking to us. That was scary. I mean, that's not the case when we smoked cigarettes in high school. Many of us tried cigarettes in high school and college, but you didn't get addicted in 2 weeks. So this is a different drug. This is, which has more significant ramifications for addiction. You know, I asked the question overtly, do you think it's addicted? And like, you dumbass, of course it's addicting, but yet they still want to try it and do it. But we wanted to see their opinion and their perspective. They are also very much aware of the addictive and physiological properties that was highlighted in the previous two presentations. But I also asked the question of what their perception of how it impacts them academically, both in school and at home. And for the educators in this room, you're acutely aware of this, that the students that are vaping are leaving class 1 to 2 times per class, which is excessive. If you have 70 to 80% of the kids trying vaping, that means there's potentially a constant thoroughfare of students getting up and leaving the class. So it's distracting for the students that are vaping, but it's more distracting, I think, for the students that are not vaping or the teachers that are standing there trying to keep the class focused. So that's a big challenge. Oddly enough, at home, they actually saw they actually saw vaping at home while studying as a reward system. If I study for a half hour, I can then go out and vape for 3 rips, and then go back to studying. So, that was an interesting perspective. And a few more things. So from their perspective, vaping equals, so the conversation of vaping is, from their perspective, from the teenage perspective, vaping equals nicotine and not THC. That when we talk to kids about vaping, they're thinking we're talking about vaping with nicotine or flavored, what's the term, Kathy? Flavored what? Juice, thank you. And that vaping, from their perspective, doesn't mean they're a bad kid. We tried cigarettes in high school and college, and 40 years ago, there were probably parents in this room talking about how to stop their kids from smoking. So they want us to know that, while vaping is not a good thing, it doesn't make them a bad kid. But that also, it doesn't necessarily make them go down the wrong path from their perspective. The other piece that came out loud and clear, we asked the question of, is right now, how should we be focusing our energies, both in a center to help them with support and at home and at school? They thought, and I think you already know this, that the Newburyport area is a competitive environment, both academically, socially, and athletically. Expectations are really high for them. In fact, extremely high was the word they used. And that they said that the real focus should be on helping them manage their anxiety and depression. And I think I've started to hear that. I've seen some of the presentations tonight that that's being addressed. And rather going from a punitive environment, or corrective environment, to that PASS program that Michelle Lipinski is doing down in Beverly High School. The fact that you're adopting it here is great, because that's kind of aligning with the students in a way that maybe a year ago they weren't seeing. So I commend you for that. They also thought that there's more opportunity to talk in group formats. They walked away from us feeling engaged and optimistic that there's room for more conversations around putting peers together and having a peer-to-peer mentorship. I know that there's some students in the room here tonight, and maybe some of you are student leaders that can help steer some of that conversation. One of the other key things, and I get this from my daughter all the time, you need to know the lingo. So dapping, ripping, nick, sick, there's terms that they throw around. And so when you use the word smoking, they say, you don't get it. That's not what it's doing. So getting the lingo is important in terms of being able to relate to them. Is there anything else with that?
No, they even mentioned when we asked them about vaping marijuana, they looked at us and said, vaping means nicotine. And we said, well, what's smoking marijuana? They're like, smoking weed, duh, that's it. So the whole perception of this is a little different from ours.
Yeah. We were also asked to put together some resources. So these internet resources were ones that we vetted out and we think would be helpful to parents in the room as well as the administrators. Some of them I've seen in previous slides, and we'll make this available through Kathy's connections to everyone here. But we have a fairly robust Department of Public Health in our state that aligns really strongly with providers and community agencies. And within that Department of Public Health, there's a bureau called Bureau of Substance Addiction Services. They provide both licensing, funding, and more importantly nowadays prevention. So I encourage you to go on BSAS's website for more information. You kind of have to navigate it. It's not sometimes obvious where to find the information, but it's very useful. SAMHSA is our federal BSAS, so it's Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. They provide funding and resources, and it's all free. So you go to SAMHSA's website, it's free to anybody. There's more than you can imagine on that site. And then the other ones are various websites that either are specific to kids and or parents and kids in a way to help get further information in addition to what we've talked about tonight. And I believe that is it for us. So thank you. Now we're turning it over to Sean, okay, for the Q&A.
All right.
Great.
Claudia, a few more questions, that'd be great.
Awesome. Nope, we're gonna go see. Oh, we got.
All right.
So we'll sit up there now?
Yes. Run ahead of the class. So what we'll do right now is our presenters and keynote speakers, come on up. You'll grab a seat up here, and then other community members will sit down in the front, like Mr. Wolf, Mr. Testa. So we'll be here. We've collected the questions, we've kind of grouped them, and then we'll have our presenters answer those questions. All the questions that have been written down, that if we don't get to them tonight because we are running a little late, we'll have a response with the question, a response, and then we'll send that out to everybody that was here tonight. So everyone's question will get answered. All right, so come on up.
You want to introduce everybody, Sean? So that people know.
Yes. Sorry about that. And then Kathy, you're up top. All right. So we'll start off. We have Mr. Wolf, Mr. Testa, Mr. Anderson, Ms. Egmont. Ms. Egmont's youth services. Mr. Anderson's the lead nurse at the high school. Mr. Wolf is the principal. Mr. Testa is the associate principal. You know your keynote speakers that are up there. And Ms. Beck has the questions. All right.
We're going to start sending around a sign-in sheet to you because
Okay.
I don't know that we have everybody's information. If
It's
you
all
could
right.
just give us your email if you'd like to have the information shared with you.
Sure. We're gonna send. I think I'm gonna send that out to the whole school system.
Okay.
So. And maybe Ms. Andy Egma, the forum that was discussed, and I appreciate the doc bringing in some students to get their perspective, but Ms. Egmont, Youth Services, we run a comprehensive survey. I'm not sure if you want to touch base on that.
Thank you. I just wanted to give people a little bit of background. That's me. Is that on? Okay. So I wanted to give people a little bit of background about the city's efforts around substance abuse prevention in general. So we've had efforts since 2005 to specifically address any high-risk behaviors, and we use what we call a positive youth development approach. And one of the key pieces of positive youth development is about engaging young people in the conversation and in the issues that we're talking about. So I think it's really important to get that perspective from young people and to hear what they're saying. But I think it's also really important to remember that their perspective is often what is leading to the issue. So for example, it's not unusual to have a group of students say everyone smokes. When we started doing this work in 2005, it was everybody smokes pot, the entire high school. And you're like, well, do you? No. Do your friends? No. Okay, so it's not actually everybody. So one of the things that we really try to do is to use data and share it back with the students as well as the community. So our next survey is actually coming in November. We do surveys every 2 years in Newburyport. Right away, there are people who are like, yeah, but everyone lies on those surveys. They don't, actually. And we know they don't because they're very similar statewide, they're very similar nationally. And what we find is that it gives us a tool to start a conversation. So the last time that we did a youth risk behavior survey in Newburyport, we were shocked that 50% of kids said that they had tried vaping and about 30% were doing it regularly. That was as the high school was really first facing, I'm looking at Mr. Testa, as he was confiscating vapes on a very regular basis, as it was really starting up, and we were like, what is going on? And I'll be really interested to see what comes this fall, because while we've seen this surge of awareness by adults, we also know that there are kids who are hearing this message, and so I'm very curious to see what the self-reporting comes back as, if it will be higher or lower. There are a lot of students who are totally annoyed with vaping. They hate that they can't go to the bathroom during the day because they might get in trouble. I mean, so this is not, while there may be a group who says, oh, everybody's tried it, the reality is they haven't, it's not everybody. And as adults, we all know that it's easy to feel that way when you're a young person. And I think the piece that we take away from that is that we have to empower and really promote the kids that are making a good choice, to remember that they're not the only ones that are making a positive choice, because they have to feel that they're not part of the minority but actually the majority. And so that's one of the key things that we've continued to try to do in the community. So the data will be collected in November, and Newburyport is really special in that the first people to see our data are young people, and they present it back at a community forum. So hopefully you'll come back to that forum as well. So, are you going to do questions now, Mr. Gallagher?
We have questions.
Lots of questions.
We do have questions. Okay.
Okay. First question, I'm going to give this for Dr. Grundman. This question is, what are the symptoms of nicotine juuling versus marijuana vaping?
Okay, though I do have a doctorate, I am not a medical doctor for seeing patients in the clinic. So the symptoms of THC vaping versus nicotine vaping, I don't have personal experience seeing those symptoms. Some of the ways that you can get the symptoms that are on the news, all those, I see vaping related stories in the news almost daily now. And the clip that I tried to show was symptoms, vaping symptoms from THC was on that particular article with the nausea and things like that. So I don't have firsthand experience with the vaping symptoms of nicotine, other than, you know, what's reported in the news media itself. Highly addictive behavior with the nicotine, and, you know, it's more of the chemical gene disease connections, but not the clinical symptoms.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, this question is for Dr. Gatzman and
Chris.
Thank you, Chris. I apologize. I think this is an important question. This is a family asking if you accept private insurance, and can all families afford your service? All families afford your service?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. That we have a sliding scale, as well as we'll have the ability to take Mass Health and a variety of third-party insurances. So I can't imagine a situation in which we're not going to be able to work with anybody in that respect.
Great, thank you very much.
Good. Yep.
For Mrs. Riccio. Will students be exposed to the same kind of presentation that we got to see tonight? And will that happen each year?
So I know that there are a number of science teachers. I got a copy of Dr. Grondin's presentation last year, so I passed that on to science teachers. I know that there are a number that do show parts of your PowerPoint and do use your database, by the way. So I will be talking, I talked this up like crazy, and I'll promise to send it out to everybody.
Thank you.
Is that right?
I have a question here, I think that's probably most appropriate for Mr. Wolf and Mr. Tresta. And this question is, what are the current bathroom policies at the high school?
So our current policies, I think as regards to if a student were to be caught vaping, so we just follow our practice of, right now if we have students that are found kind of huddled around in the bathroom, we use that as reasonable suspicion to conduct searches. And then in the girls' restrooms, if there's more than one girl in a stall, that is also reasonable suspicion to conduct searches. And especially in the boys' rooms this year, that has been helpful. The girls' restrooms, just in terms of polling kids each week is still an area that we're trying to strengthen. We just recently, in working with our building union representation, were able to switch up some of our teacher duties to have more adult presence. And we had a few of our female teachers who have switched up their duties for that purpose, to really have more female adult presence in the female restrooms. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Thank you very much. Okay, Christine and Dr. Gassman. How can kids become better consumers of information and critical thinkers in the face of the propaganda online that says the vaping of nicotine and THC is harmless and safe?
So if I can summarize the question, how can students get accurate information to have resources to better understand what their needs are around vaping? Is that?
I think so, and then in addition to become, critical thinkers and better consumers.
Right, I think, so some of the information that was presented tonight are good resources to start with in terms of sharing with students resources around vaping and the challenges around that, both for the addictive properties and how to and cessation activities. So sharing that information, I think, is helpful. Critical thinking comes from their ability to want to learn and take in that information. So partnering with parents, partnering with peer groups, partnering with the school administration, teachers, guidance counselors, and nurses, I think all have an opportunity to have that dialogue to collectively gather information and share it.
Great, thank you very much.
Actually, one other item I would suggest also is in the mental health arena, it's very common for those type of conversations to happen with counselors, therapists, nurse practitioners, psychiatrists. So that was the other, what we see that fairly often is using your licensed professionals as a resource as well.
Great.
This one, well, a few more questions for tonight, but for Dr. Rodden. It says you showed nicotine in jewels converts into many harmful substances. Is this also the case for other substances, vape? I know people have been asking about like THC, but any other substances that people are utilizing the electronic cigarette?
The short answer is yes. That almost all chemicals can undergo chemical reactions to change into other components. And on our website, when you look up a specific chemical, there's also child terms that we call the descendants or metabolites of these chemicals. So most of the chemicals do have changes in form. And if they're not a direct change in form that's separately, individually looked at in the database, when other genes interact with a chemical, it can change the form. So yeah, the short answer is definitely yes.
I also have my own follow-up here. The governor put a ban, temporary ban on juuling. Is this because of the scientists like yourself providing information. I mean, I know you've been providing information for schools and superintendents, but to the local politician and state officials that all of a sudden, when they saw this information, that's what led to that ban?
My understanding is that it wasn't information from scientists such as myself that led to the ban, but more information from clinicians and doctors in hospitals and the reported illnesses in the hospital setting, like the 1,400 mystery illnesses and things like that that led to the ban. Really the unknown factor of what's happening with the black market and THC, that's what's led to the ban, and not specific, scientists reporting directly to politicians at all.
Great, thank you. And just a couple more here. Back to the high school. There was a question on the PASS program. Could you just kind of talk about that? And just how that's leading towards more, instead of suspension and discipline, how that's leading to more addressing the issue of rehabilitation and counseling.
Yes, so the PASS program, as was explained earlier, stands for Positive Alternative to School Suspension. And we've sent a few students there this year. This is the first year we are a member school. I believe there are 10 districts which have paid membership to be able to send students there. So there's, I think, Ipswich, Saugus, Manchester, Essex, some schools in Lynn, Wilmington, Beverly. So around that area. Proximity allows Beverly to send the most students. Some schools use it just simply as an in-house suspension alternative, particularly if they're very close. Others use it to either reduce or replace an external suspension for all types of offenses, but namely for substances. So we have, in our handbook, a student would be suspended outside of school for their second offense at any point in their career with a vape product or vaping in school. So the first offense, they go through the school-based diversion program that Kathy Riccio explained, which we created this year. Second offense would be an out-of-school suspension, and we have had the need to refer kids to PASS this year for their second offense with vaping. And so the program does have a number of counselors there and an academic component, but what's been really useful and beneficial is that they also write somewhat like a discharge summary for each student with recommendations back to our school counselors about how to support the students upon their return back to the high school in terms of what may have been stressors, causes of anxiety, or things that they enjoy about their community back at school. We had one student go there proactively for several days, just asked as a therapeutic support. It was not put in place as a consequence, but in working with the student and the family, she benefited from a more therapeutic setting for a few days and has been a bit more successful upon her return. So it's been a nice resource for us, because to just suspend and cut a kid away from the community is not helpful to solving the problem, regardless of what that problem is.
Great. Okay, this is a question I think for a lot of people that are at the table today, so please feel free to answer this if you have information about this. I think there's some concern around whether or not we actually have a handle or an understanding, a handle on or an understanding of where our students are obtaining their vaping products. So do we know if they're getting them in school from other students? Are they getting them at a store? Is it something that dealers are providing them with? And there's a second, I'm going to let you answer that question first.
My understanding is that they're coming from several different places. There are plenty of shops that you can go and buy. And whether you go or you have an older friend who is legal and able to buy is one of the factors. And then online is another one. So we know of some kids who said that they went and bought gift cards, like Visa gift cards, and then they could go online and purchase with a credit card and have it delivered to their house. So smart. I mean, I know that sounds awful, but like very creative when an addiction is there and you need to get it. And also the stores, and I think that's just to add one thing to that, one of the other things that we've tried to do as a community is focus both on direct strategies as well as environmental strategies. So the difference there is actual interventions in the school are direct strategies. Curriculum in wellness classes that are trying to change a child's behavior are direct strategies. Environmental strategies are when we look at changing policy, right? So it's very hard to say we're going to go out and change people's behavior. It's a very hard thing to do. However, when it comes to protecting our young people's developing minds, what we try to do is change the fabric of the community in a way that supports them making healthier choices. And so we do that through looking at accessibility. We do that through looking at policy, at restorative justice, you know, instead of just punitive. And so those are the other pieces as a community I think we need to continue to look at, is like we've done with alcohol, like we've done with tobacco, is to also look at the policies we have in place. And we're really fortunate to have a Board of Health, I think, that's really been not just great, but progressive when it comes to some of the pieces. And we need to continue to look at how we can change some of the larger community pieces to make sure access is kept to a minimum.
I'm Frank Giacalone from the Health Department, and I do agree with what Andrea had said, that my research showed that majority of the vaping products from underage kid are being purchased or given to them from someone who is able to purchase it. And the online stats also, that kind of surprised me about with this generation of social media and everything else. Our Board of Health did see that earlier. We did raise the age of purchase to 19 when it was 18. And unfortunately, the surrounding communities that didn't raise their age also, people would just be going right over the border to the next town and purchase that as well. So again, it's the older people that are purchasing it for the younger people, and that just, I can't just understand that. Why would somebody want someone addicted to something like that?
I actually can address that piece of it. The reason why some of the older individuals are doing it is because they're making money from it. They're charging a service fee for doing that. Similar, in a similar way, when we were kids trying to cop beer at the local liquor store, you'd give them a few bucks and they'd come out with a six-pack. The same thing's happening in that respect.
Can I ask you, have the Newburyport police upped the efforts to, I mean, certainly I would be surprised to know that people are still buying beer for little kids.
It's actually not the police, so we all work in partnership. So we, as far as alcohol goes, the police do undercover stings or whatever we want to call them, but tobacco and vaping actually falls under the Board of Health, and there's a regional piece that comes out and does.
We're part of a tobacco coalition with 12 other communities, and we do conduct stings, so to speak. So they will send underage kids in to see if they can purchase any type of tobacco product, and if they are able to, then they send the underage kid back out, and our enforcement officer will go in, and it's a fining process as well, where eventually lead up to loss of license to sell too.
But the sales are to legal. So if you're 18 and you go, it's like when I was growing up, people used to go to New Hampshire and buy a case of cigarettes and bring it back and sell it at high school and make money off it.
I think the school resource officer wanted to say something, and then we have to.
I think at this point, it's a point of sale issue that Board of Health sort of enforces. We don't really have any enforcement because possession of tobacco products doesn't fall under any state statute that I can enforce. So the difficulty now is just determining whether the vapes contain THC or nicotine, and that would determine in-school disciplinary action.
Do you have any control over like product placement in stores?
I think that is actually
They don't put
controlled.
cigarettes on the counter anymore.
Right. You can't put vapes on the counter either.
There are rules and regulations how you can display it, where you can display it. A lot of the products you can't have where it's self-serve, so it has to be either behind the counter or far enough away. We don't have access to it. There's signage that needs to be posted there as well, for warnings and everything else. So yes, there are guidelines.
I know we could probably sit here for another 1 or 2 hours having conversations. And I'm grateful to the panel members who came, the presentations that were here, to those who are working and supporting our students in the schools. Thank you for being here also. Thank you to members of the community for coming. This will be posted on the Hub PortMedia website, also a link to the school website so that we'll be able to watch this. I believe that this is probably the beginning of many conversations that we are going to be having about vaping. I'm really proud of the work that we're doing in the community with the schools, working with our police department. Just wanted to give a shout out to the fact that the work that we've been doing in the community. We just received a $600,000 Department of Justice grant to, again, working with the folks who are addicts, working mostly with overdoses, but it still shows the kind of effort. That's a regional Essex County grant that we continue to work at all facets and all levels of addiction. And I love the fact that the students are telling you, get down to the 3rd grade, because that's, that's where we start. That's where, the Attorney General came when she came into the school system. She started in the middle school. So we continue to work at it. We'll continue to educate the community as new information comes in. We have a wealth of knowledge here. I'm very grateful for the expansion of Link House and the services they're providing in the greater Newburyport community, and thank all of you for being here tonight for this really important start of a conversation to educate the public about all we're doing to address this very serious issue of vaping. So thank you again for being here.